guys. You gotta learn how to hold them, man. You can make
Friends, please join me as we go to the Lord in prayer.
Well.
Hold that deer head.
Yeah.
Lord, we are honored to be here today to do the work of the Cherokee people, and we ask that you guide us, you lead us, you show us the way that you would have us to go. Bless all of our efforts. Bless all those we serve. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Roll call, Shirley, please.
Yes, sir. Rick Jordan.
Here.
Theo Smith.
Here.
Dawson.
Here.
Ellie Buzzard. Joe Bird.
Aye.
Julia Pope. Sean Crittenden.
Here.
Joe Deere.
Aye.
Mike Dobbins.
Here.
Peyton Duncan.
Aye.
Darrell Legg.
Here.
Weston O'Hare.
Aye.
Laura Petchkowski.
Here.
Mike Shambaugh.
Here.
Mary Bakershaw.
Connie.
Denise Taylor. Here. Victoria Vesquez. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Need approval of the minutes from August the 27th.
Make a motion they be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Pass. Reports. Mr. David Moore. You on the line?
How are you guys doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hey, I'd like to first, I'd like to apologize for this report. I just got here and looking at it, and the one that I made up didn't get to y'all. This is pretty much last month's report, so I'll run through it real quick. About the only changes on there, we, like, on the first page, we did receive both the buffalo from the Yellowstone herd. We're still, cutting hay. Up top, the disinfecting machines, we had 2 of the hyperfluorous machines are up and running right now. Our project, the OSU project, we're on schedule for substantial completion for September 14th for the school's use on the first and second floor. And Wilma Peak, we are currently doing footings. Everything else is basically, we're doing the same thing, sanitizing daily. And it's been tough for our workforce, you know, it's pretty low right now, but the guys and ladies have done a tremendous job every day, sanitizing, trying to keep employees safe and for our citizens as they come in.
Is that it?
Yes, sir, sorry.
Where's these machines at, David?
They're over in the recycle center.
Okay,
I'll get some pictures for the next report.
okay.
See some samples.
Yeah. Samples, we want samples. Harley?
Yeah, David, I have an elderly lady there in Jay. They had a tornado, I don't know, several months ago, and they pushed a bunch of debris up in her yard, and she was asking if there's any help. Do you still do some of that, or who do I refer to?
Probably need to run that through emergency management. Philip Maine.
What's the name?
Philip Maine,
Okay, all right, I'll do that. Thank you.
thank you.
Joe Deere, you got a question?
Hey David, I know we broke ground on 10. Are those done yet?
Thanks a lot.
That's all I got.
It was a long day, but it's exciting to see that. Working on or moving forward fast.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Any other questions for David? Junior?
Yes, sir, David, on that cleaning solution stuff, if we bring our own jugs or something, can we get some, or how do we get it?
Are you talking about the acid? I can't hear very well.
Yes, I don't know what they call it, but it's a
Yeah.
cleaning solution there.
Yeah, I'll have to defer to chief of staff. We haven't really addressed handing it out to individuals. We're trying to get it to our community centers and places like that, but he may have a plan for you guys where y'all can get a hold of it.
Todd?
Yes, sir. So in addition to the machines that make hypochlorous acid, we call it magic juice, but it's basically, it's a electrolyzed salt water, but it lowers the pH of that and creates hypochlorous acid. We can make about a gallon a minute. It's got a shelf life of about 90 days. We have to monitor the pH to make sure it stays within the accurate range, and then if we don't use it, or it has to be stored indoors, can't be in direct sunlight because it'll alter the pH and mess up the effectiveness of the solution. So Dave's done a good job of getting that set up. In addition to the machine, we've actually purchased several totes, 55 gallon, 30 gallon, 15 gallon, and 5 gallon buckets, as well as 1 gallon jugs. What our hope is that we work with the community organizations and the rural fire departments to get that out into the areas. So the tote, the largest tote we have, handles about 330 gallons. It could be stored at a rural fire department, and then schools and other organizations come in and get a refill of 5 gallon jug. So the theory would be much like a propane tank exchange. We would send out the larger tanks to the rural fire departments, and then the community orgs and others can go to that rural fire department, get the refill, and just swap out their supplies. But the one thing we want to make sure is that handoff is we maintain good control of making sure it's stored properly, and that the time stamp, we'll want to watch that pretty closely and make sure we don't have anything that gets us out too far and gets expired. So that's kind of our plans. We're going to be working with rural fire departments, and we're trying to make sure we've got the resources to deliver it, or them to come see us. I would prefer it if they came saw us, but I'm not sure every rural fire department's going to have the resources to come do that. Hopefully that helps, but that's kind of the solution that we're looking at going with there.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
David, I don't know if if you're the person not to answer this, but I've been getting complaints about waiting times at the distribution center in Jay. I don't know about the other places, but I've been up there 3 times in the last month, and the longest a person I talked to had been there for 3.5 hours. I was there the day of the groundbreaking, and there was 5 there who had been there for 1.5 hours. I know the more people, the longer it takes, but is there any process that maybe could, or maybe we could tweak this to speed it up, or are you even the guy I need to talk to?
No, donated foods is not under us, but chief of staff may be able to help you out a little bit on that.
Do you want me to take that one?
Sorry, chief of staff.
Well, I'm not the chief of staff, but I can answer. That is through Human Services. They'll report later today, or I can take that back for you if you'd
My
like.
committee. Okay, thank you.
Any other
I have
questions?
a comment.
Yes, sir.
David, I think what I'm going to do is see if any of this committee here is interested in meeting with some of the Quapaw leaders on the bison and see if we can't see how they're doing those and process it, see if we can't get some ideas just for discussion. And I know the new chairman there, and we're just going to, if any of these committee people are interested, I'm going to set up a meeting with them and just outside. It's not going to be inside. It doesn't have to be big. So if some of you are interested, get with me. I'm going to set up a meeting. Maybe we can have a meeting outside and just see what they're doing, if that's something that we want to invest in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll do, and Dale and Stevie meet with them quite often. They've been a good partner with us so far with helping us with our herd.
Okay.
Todd.
To follow up on that, I was going to say that we do work with the Quapaws quite often. In addition to that, we've got some stuff that we're looking at as we've continued our discussion with the meat processing. We're looking at 2 solutions. We had to sign a very brief non-disclosure agreement for us to proceed on with one of the vendors, and so we're working towards a solution for us to actually begin to offer meat processing operations. And grand scheme is going to include career services of creating a career track with Diane Kelly, making sure that we got a good supply chain of employees. But we'd love to attend that and learn a little bit more on some of the inner workings, since you might have an inside track to the Quapaws here.
Any other questions for David? Yes, sir.
I might add on that processing of the Buffalo Council has offered to help pay for some of us if we ever wanted to process any.
Really?
And we've got 2 checks from them. There's pretty good checks this year from them in the grant thing too, but they said they would help us on the process if we ever really got interested in it.
Good. Okay.
Any other questions for David? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Real Estate Services, Ginger Reeves.
Good afternoon. I think you have a copy of my report. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Anybody have any questions for Ginger? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Ginger. Ginger, I was wondering, I saw where we had 4 properties get purchased. Can you tell me what the purpose of those properties are?
What the purposes of them are?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the Nowata parcel is adjacent to our community building, just to get an idea of where they are. The Barrett building in Bonita connects to the Barrington building that was donated to us a year or so ago. And the 5 acres in Holbert is adjacent to the community building that we currently have. And the 4th one, we closed on the J.W. Sam Elementary. Chief of Staff, would you like to address those properties? I know you have worked with the facilities as well on these properties. See in there?
Yes, yes.
sidebar conversation. So the 4 properties. So JWCM property in Catoosa was one of the groundbreakings that we had. It's a former elementary school. So we have a short and a long-term use in that facility. Short term, it's going to be allow some of our office staff to spread out a little bit and creates a greater access for citizenry. Longer term, child care center, so similar to the child care center here in Tahlequah, as well as the one in Stillwell, and that will be to service many of the employees that either work at the casino or citizens that live in and around the community. So. And then third is going to be a community center offering to allow the community orgs to come together and have a place to meet there in the old gym, and then access to a kitchen inside that facility. So it was actually a really good purchase, and it's adjacent to some housing authority property back behind there. And so that's kind of the short and long term use on that one. Ginger, remind me which are the other 3?
The Barrett Building in Bonita for locating other employees from the clinic, I believe, right?
Yes. So in that particular instance, we are trying to socially distance and move some of the staff that are not clinical based staff out of there and relocate them to an alternate facility, but still trying to keep our employees centrally located and adjacent to one another. But if they're not delivering clinical care, trying to separate them from that clinical operation. Did I hit them
Final
all?
one was the Nowata parcel that is adjacent to the community building there in the clinic area.
Yeah. So we don't have a use just right away because there's already a tenant in that facility. And they have long-term lease on that, but long-term, we'd be looking at a child care operation or a Head Start facility in that location as well.
Is it
in the long
currently
term.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is it currently a Head Start facility?
I don't believe it's a Head Start, it's a child care
Okay,
facility,
child care.
but not organized and funded by Head Start, but it's a child care operation there. And then Ginger, what was my other one?
The Holbert one you addressed.
No, I hadn't actually touched on Hulbert yet. So Hulbert's actually going to be a PPE manufacturing facility. We were struggling to get all of the machines that we've acquired into Stillwell because of some space requirements, so we'll have some of those located at Hulbert as well. And trying to diversify some of the manufacturing operations and offer some opportunities for folks outside in different places. If we get really good at it, then we may look at diversifying and going into other communities as well. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Ginger? Yes.
Ginger, where are we on the Owen School building being donated back to the tribe?
The old school building is actually in Cherokee Nation's ownership. It's in our name.
Okay, perfect. I just, the community leader had emailed back out to me. I guess you may have called her, and she just had missed the phone call and trying to reach back out to you, I think. Marla Secker, I think she was reaching out to you. I was just going to try to see if you could reach back out to her.
Okay, I'll be happy to call her. I didn't receive that, but I will be happy to make a phone call. But it is filed in the name of Cherokee Nation.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sean?
Hey, Ginger, did Joel ever get with you? Did anything ever come about the airport, the guys that were talking about doing something out there?
He mentioned it. I don't believe that they have come up with a business plan to discuss it further, other than the communication he had with Joel.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ginger.
You're welcome.
Environmental programs, Tom Elkins.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to take Tom's report today. He's occupied and unavailable. The report's been submitted. You have it in front of you. One thing I would point out is the efforts that environmental programs have been engaging in on the COVID-19 sampling. They've been doing a lot of this largely after hours. They're covering a lot of facilities, and they're also able to maintain all of the other deliverables with the Housing Authority, environmental reviews, and the various other programs that they have. So I certainly commend the efforts that they've been engaged in to stay on top of programs that take on extra duties. So if you have any specific questions as to that report, I'm here to take those questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Chad? Okay, you want to go ahead with yours?
Yes, sir, if I may. So a couple of things that I'd like to touch on that kind of extend beyond the normal operations that we have. And first, following up on the conversation we had about 2 weeks ago about the landfill master plan. We're still going through reviewing the data, analyzing that data, and working with our contract engineering team to put together numbers and various scenarios along the lines of what we discussed for the options for optimizing the way that we currently operate, the financial analysis, and potential long-term and mid-term operational goals. I don't have anything in addition to report on that yet, but we are still diligently working toward that, and I'll make it a point at every one of these resource committee meetings to update on the status of that. It is going to take some time. There's a lot of material to move through, a lot of data to crunch, and so I'll certainly keep you posted, and hopefully we'll have some serious milestones to share as materializing as we go along. The other issue I wanted to touch on is our EV project. I know a lot of you are aware of our solar canopy that we have out front here in the complex, and I've mentioned in past meetings that we've sought and acquired substantial grant funding for expanding our EV program across the 14 counties. As of right now, we've received a little over $6 million, and I anticipate that we're going to receive a little bit more. That's a very substantial sum for the projects that we're looking at. The first project that I anticipate we're going to get off the ground is a supplement to our existing transit system with electric buses that are going to be attached to rural transit systems we have, specifically a transit route between Stillwell and West Salem Springs and from Tahlequah to the Catoosa area. I think there's an area near Shoto where they're going to tie into existing public transportation. All of this is going to be open to the public in the same fashion as our transit system currently is. And I believe once we get this complete, hopefully the end of this year, the first of next year, this will be the first rural electric transit bus system in the country. So that's something that we're certainly proud of. We are still in the design phase and for all of the additional projects that we have coming over the next couple of years. We're going to be looking at installing additional solar canopies at some of our entertainment venues, and then potentially at some of our clinics, and also identifying some maybe heavy-duty vehicles that might fit the required qualifications for replacement. Again, all of this is tailored to reducing emissions from the grants that we received, and also the Volkswagen Education Trust that we received the majority of this funding for. So hopefully we're moving forward as aggressively as we can to put together our short-term and long-term plan on this. But again, the first project that we're going to see is the electric buses, 2 of which are almost nearly through the production line. And then we'll have, we're installing charger systems at both the Stillwell and Tahlequah locations to provide the infrastructure there. The other issue I wanted to touch on briefly is the safety amendment that's been circulating. As you're aware, the state of Oklahoma has attempted to authorize an amendment to a 2005 spending bill that would give them authority to exercise environmental jurisdiction over tribal lands. One of the first actions that was taken after the McGirt decision was decided was the state provided a request to the EPA to activate that particular section. That particular section applies only to Oklahoma tribes. It's somewhat unique in the regulatory framework for environmental programs in Indian country, but it is effective in Oklahoma and sought to be activated against the 5 tribes at the very least.
We've requested formal consultation with the EPA to discuss what that means and certainly to object to the state's requests. And I've had a series of consultations where we've outlined a number of different concerns that we have about enforcement gaps and there's 35 years of existing EPA policy that requires these issues to be considered in a certain way when they impact reservation lands. And so we've asserted that claim with the EPA, had a series of consultations, and have asked for additional time to discuss in specific issues. The initial window of time we had was about 3 weeks, and I don't think that that's appropriate for us to fully consider this issue, but the EPA is taking a pretty hard stance on this, and the language is complicated for us in some ways, but I do think that we have an option here to explore additional time to review what this means, and certainly we'll continue to object to the course of action that the state has requested. My hope is that we'll have additional conversations and consultations with the EPA going down the road. I should hear something probably within the next probably 3 weeks, I would imagine, as to what they anticipate their next steps will be. And I certainly keep this body updated as we go along. Those are the three major things to update from our meeting 2 weeks ago. If there's any specific questions you have, I can answer them.
Mr. Shambaugh?
So what exactly is the state wanting to do, in a nutshell?
So in a nutshell, reservations have a specific deference of treatment when implementing and enforcing environmental laws within their boundaries. The McGirt decision reinforced the boundary of the Muskogee Creek Nation specifically, and I think there's been a lot of discussion on this topic in the past rules committees, but by implication, the language of that decision would extend presumably to the Cherokee Nation. Back in 2005, there was a rider slipped into an appropriations bill by an Oklahoma senator that specifically gives the state of Oklahoma the right to seek environmental jurisdiction over tribal reservation lands by request to the EPA. That doesn't apply anywhere else in the country but to Oklahoma. After the McGirt decision, the state of Oklahoma tried to activate that particular section of the law, and it's currently being reviewed by the EPA. What that would essentially do is give the state of Oklahoma jurisdiction over specific lands within the Cherokee Nation reservation boundaries. However, they have specifically excluded the less than restricted properties that we currently have here in our boundaries. So essentially what they've asked to do is to maintain the status quo of environmental regulation and jurisdiction in Oklahoma prior to the McGirt decision. That is, as I mentioned, the McGirt decision changes the landscape for environmental regulation, which would be to the detriment of the state, but expanding jurisdiction for the tribe. They've tried to take that action in order to revert it back to the pre-McGirt status quo, where we would still retain our reservation or jurisdiction over our trust and restricted allotments, but we would not have jurisdiction over fee lands within our boundaries.
So is that state mandated or is that federal mandated?
So that was a federal statute that was passed back in 2005 that created a process for the state to request that. The state has never done so so far in the history of that particular amendment being activated into law, but they have exercised it now.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
Sure.
Any other questions? Harley?
Yeah, Chad, I know last month I'd asked for some correspondence, but the Bureau of Indian Affairs said about our pine tree operations and what the holdup is on it. I think Speaker Byrd had also requested to get a meeting with BLM. Where are we on those requests?
So the request has been made for for us to have this meeting. I have sent out one additional letter since that time requesting that the Bureau consider permitting this in accordance with the law applicable to forestry production, and I haven't heard back from them. I do want to clarify one particular piece of a statement that I made last month that was incorrect. That statement was that the BIA had rejected the USDA's environmental process that they use to evaluate this issue. That was true in the past, but I think back in early March they actually the BIA proceeded with their own individual environmental analysis, and that is that has been completed. The issue that we have now is the specific regulatory framework by which forestry applications are approved are separate and apart from the leasing requests that you would typically see coming from realty. In those, if you recall, there's opportunities where you can waive valuation and you can waive bonding and a number of other different things. As I understand it, the forestry regulations are much more stringent, and they're designed to be more protective of forestry operations, most likely tailored to the Pacific Northwest region where forestry is a big tribal economic enterprise. And so it removes some of the flexibility that we have as a tribe to say, issue or put together a resolution saying this is what we want, because it's completely and solely within the purview of the BIA. I know that the chief has asked me to do anything and everything I can do to try to push this along, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to get to some resolution soon. Initially, we received a cost-sharing grant from the USDA in the amount of around $80,000, and it was for a one-year period of time. That period expired, and we asked for an extension to give us more time to work with the BIA. That one-year extension expired, and we have asked them again for another extension, which they've granted. What we're essentially asking the BIA to do is to take this particular instance and treat it differently than you would a for-profit timber operation, because the analysis that we've got from independent third parties is that this project is not going to be profitable. I think, in fact, it loses about $5 to $8 for every ton of timber that's going to be removed from the site. And that has a lot to do with the type of operation for thinning. It also has to do with the price of lumber generally, and it has to do with the location of the mills. The proposal that we have on the table is for thinning out 333 acres of these loblolly pines. In that particular area, we have a total, I want to say over 2,500 acres of pines that need to be managed, so to speak. But with the $80,000 cost share, we think that we could get approximately 333 of those acres thinned out and cleared up a little bit with the $80,000 supplement that we have from the USDA. I think that the biggest issue that we're having is with the BIA. They have never issued this type of permit exception that we've asked them to have, and that's largely because timber in this area of Oklahoma, or at least with the Eastern Regional Office here, is not a typical operation that tribes engage in. And so we have asked them to take the exceptions that are allowed under the law to the fullest extent possible to help us accommodate this project. And that's where we're at. So we're pushing them as hard as we can. The chief's directive is for me to try to get this done. And I'm going to push for a meeting and see what next steps we can do to move it along in the way that we've hoped. Fortunately, we have a one-year extension of this cost share, so that gives us a little bit more time to really have these conversations with them and push as hard as we can.
Sound like you've moved from one obstacle to the next one's going to be even more stringent after you got past the environmental. Okay.
That sums up my interaction with the BIA thus far in my career, but yes.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to bring this up again. I brought it up for the last 10 years. I'm through. Thank you.
Councilor Buzzard, I promise you we're going to continue to push as hard as we can on this, and I will keep you updated regularly as to the status of this. And,
all right, well, push as hard as you want to, but I'm through pushing. Thank you.
That's sir.
Any other questions for Chad? Mary?
Hi, Chad. Chad, I've got the same question I have every meeting. Any news about getting temporary fishing permits for at-large Cherokees visiting?
I have no new updates to provide at this time. I have reached back out to try to push along the conversation with our state counterparts on this particular topic. As I mentioned last month, the McGirt decision kind of changes this conversation a little bit, both on our end and on their end. And prior to the McGirt decision, there was some reluctance on the state's part to consider our requests and proposals, I believe, in good faith. And the history there with the state and the tribes is pretty well known. But I do think that the McGirt decision changes that conversation a little bit on both sides, and that's what we're still grappling with, what the next path forward is going to be. I anticipate having some conversations with my peers over at the state very soon I just don't know how fruitful they're going to be.
Thank you
But
so
I'll certainly
much.
keep you updated.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And as always, I'll follow Mary and say we can just insert our sovereignty jurisdiction with our hunting and fishing there, and that's where I stand on it. So hopefully those things get pushed forward on the state, and they can realize that we have that sovereign ability there. So appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chad. Done good. Moving right along, old business none, new business none, announcements? Any announcements? I need one motion.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second,
Got a motion and a second, all in favor?
there's that
We are
enthusiasm Mary
adjourned.
was looking for.